and love West Hartford very much. And I'm very active in many organizations. One of them is I'm the chaplain for the Connecticut Ex-Prisoners of War. And I was commander of the Jewish Ward Veterans, Laurel Post 45. And I'm very active in it. And I was recently the marshal in the Hartford Parade, honorary marshal in the Hartford Parade. And was in the West Hartford parade just a few weeks ago, and it started to rain, and a funny thing happened. I was waving to everybody, and all of a sudden the rain looked upstairs and said, "I wish that rain would stop." And a few minutes later, guess what happened? The rain stopped.
That's great.
And there I am, waving to people and saying, "How are you?" and so forth, and yelling at them. I told the rain to stop, and the rain stopped. I'm the chaplain for the Connecticut ex-POWs. I think I made it stop. And so there was a nice parade. And at the ceremony that we had at West Hartford Center, there's a large memorial site with the names of people who passed away on the ground. And Mayor Slifka, when he announced some of the heroes of World War II, all of a sudden, out of a clear blue sky, he pronounced, "I want to tell you a story about Abe Homar, who was one of the great heroes of World War II," which surprised me. And he said that I'd flown a bomber over Germany, and this is what he told, and that I'd flown 30, 40 missions over Germany, and was shot down. It was a prisoner of war, and being a Jewish nomination, he was tortured. He was beaten up terribly, and he was lucky that he survived to come out of Germany alive.
Great. Can you tell me where you were, and did you enlist or were you drafted?
No. My father ran a ginger ale company, and he got sick. He got sick at about the time I was to be drafted. I had worked in Taylor and Fenn factory previous to that, and so Max Miller, who was the chairman of the committee for induction, I went to him. I said, "Max," I said, "my father is ill. I have to take over for a month or so. Is it possible to delay me for a month?" And sure enough, it was arranged. And so I enlisted, went to Camp Devens in Massachusetts, and took examinations. And they said, "Well, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go into the Air Corps." At that time, they needed Air Corps men desperately because they needed men to replace the men that were being shot down over Germany. And so I said, "Okay." They said, "Okay." They sent me to my first going area was from there to Lincoln, Nebraska. It was for basic training. And there, I stayed there for about 6 weeks, 2 months, so forth. Then I went back to Paterson, New Jersey to Wright Engine Specialist School for specializing in training. Then I was sent to Kingman, Arizona for gunnery training. And I used to fly over the Grand Canyon in an open seater. And I'll never forget this. They had tow targets. They had planes with tow targets. And we were supposed to shoot at the tow targets. But it's a good thing it was a two-seater. And it was a good thing that I was strapped in that plane, because the downdrafts were so bad that many of the time I found I was about 2-3 feet above the cockpit. And it was enough to scare the heck out of you. And you had to pull yourself down to get back into the seat.
Now, you did this training over the actual Grand Canyon?
Oh, yeah, with gunnery training, yeah. And plus on the ground, and plus a lot of other things. And from there, we went to Wenatchee, Washington, for another type of training. And after Wenatchee, Washington, we found ourselves in Spokane, Washington. And in Spokane, Washington, we were assigned to a crew. And we had a nice crew. You had all young, 21, 22, 23 years old. We used to fly out to the Pacific and practicing and dropping bombs and so forth and so on. And after we completed our training there, after we completed our training there, they said, "You're ready to go overseas." Now, what had happened was this. A lot of planes were going over to supposedly to occupied England. A lot of planes who were not professionals or didn't know exactly where, they landed in Iceland, and then when they were approaching Ireland or Scotland, the Germans honed in on their signals, and before they knew it, they landed in occupied France and were captured.
Wow.
They captured the whole plane, and with all the people in it, and most of the secrets that we had.
Wow.
So they stopped it. So they said to us, "We're going to divide you up. We're going to send you to Grand Island, Nebraska, where where you'll be split up on two planes, and the planes carrying supplies over to England, and you'll meet in England." So the plane that I was on, don't forget, I hadn't had a furlough. Here it is 8 months later, and hadn't even had a chance to be home. So the pilot on the plane says, "We're going to Cleveland, Ohio, where we're going to get some gas from where we were in Kingman, let me see, it was Nebraska." So we landed, and we couldn't get gas in Cleveland. So pilot says, "Well," we get on the plane, the pilot says, "Well, we're going to have to go to LaGuardia Field to get some gas." They were short of gas. So we got up, and we landed in LaGuardia Field. I had called while in Cleveland. I called my parents and said to them, "I want you to come to New York, and I'm going to be staying over for a night or two. I want you to come to one of our relatives' house, and I would be able to see you there." And sure enough, plane landed in Cleveland, and we went over and we saw my parents and so forth and so on. Then we got in our plane again, and the pilot says, "No gas. There's no gas here in Cleveland either. We're going to Hartford, Connecticut, to the Cleveland." Okay.
You're at LaGuardia.
Yeah, we're at LaGuardia. We couldn't get any gas at all, so we're going to Hartford, Connecticut, to gas up. Sure enough, I see the Merritt Parkway, and we land at Rentschler Field here in Hartford. I went to the old Hotel Bonds, called a friend of mine who came to Rentschler Field and took me home. And when my parents got home, thinking I'm all the way in England already,
yeah.
when I got home, and they opened up the door, and I was in a house. The first time they'd seen me all this time.
That must be great.
And had a party. We had a party at the old Hotel Bonds, and most everybody was there and so forth. And then the next day we took off, and we flew to Presque Isle, Maine.
How long had it been since you saw your parents?
I hadn't seen them since I had from when I started to when I landed in Rentschler Field.
Yeah, long time.
So we left the next day. We went to Presque Isle, Maine. We got to Presque Isle, Maine. Stayed there for a day or two. Then we went to Iceland. Landed in Iceland, and there was another danger. Many planes who landed in Iceland in the fog and so forth ended up in the drink, ended up in the ocean, and the whole crew were killed. It was full of airplanes, people that were going overseas.
Was it because of the fog or the ice?
The fog and the ice and the weather was terrible. We took off from Iceland. We landed in Glasgow, Scotland. And we got together, and the next thing we know, we were assigned to the 91st Bomb Group in England, Bassingbourn, England. And while I was at the Air Base in Scotland, I became very friendly with a doctor. We became real good friends. Later on, I hear doctors had to fly missions over Germany, and then he went on one mission, and he never made it. He got killed. So we started flying. We started flying in September, October, I can't remember the date exactly, missions over Germany.
This is 1943 or 44?
This is later 43. So we started like in October of 43, and we got shot down February 22nd of 44. And on the mission, the winter was horrific. The winter was so terrible. We used to fly at 30,000 feet. The weather, we had oxygen masks that used to freeze, and we had to crunch the ice and spit out the ice. The ice got into our mouths.
Sure.
Just from the air. And we fought the Luftwaffe. The minute we took off, they were there 18 miles across the channel. 18 miles. It'd take 2 minutes, and we were already in combat. And the Germans, they tracked us, and they trailed us, and they shot us down by the hundreds. It was, we made our, oops, this came off.
You can clip it back on.
How do you put it on? No, I'm afraid I can't. I don't know where the, oh, it's the other way around. Okay, good, thanks. The Luftwaffe at that time was so powerful, they were shooting down 20, 30, 40, 50 bombers almost every day. Once in a while, in bad weather, we would go up, and the clouds were up to 25, 30,000 feet, and we had to climb above the clouds in order to see what we were doing. We didn't have any radar at the time. We didn't have any connections with. We had radio, but that didn't help us. In the planes next to us, and many planes collided into each other. January 11th of 44. I got to mention that, and I have it in writing here. That day, I had missed a mission and flew with another crew. If you missed a mission, I had been wounded previous, so I didn't fly for a couple of missions. So I had to make it up. And I have a copy of this here, in which I won the Distinguished Flying Cross over here. And I'll tell you what happened on that one day. It was one of the biggest battles of the war. We shot down 210 German fighters. It's documented right here. We lost 42 bombers. 420 men. I was on that mission. My crew didn't fly in that mission. Why? Because it was their turn for other people to go. And so, I won the Distinguished Flying Cross, and of course they didn't win it, they weren't on that mission. But what a battle it was. It was a terrible battle, not just one time.
And when were you notified of the Service Cross? Did you get that?
Oh, we got that way after the war.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they didn't, this came out after the war. Let me see, it just says January 11th of 44, the 1st Bombardment Division is cited the extraordinary heroism, determination, and esprit de corps in action against the enemy on the 11th The Air Force penetrated into central Germany to attack vital aircraft factories after assembly was accomplished and the formation was proceeding towards Germany. Adverse weather was, I can't read it, I have to get my glasses. Okay, anyway, the gunners met these attacks with accurate fire, and the division continued towards the targets as briefed where bombs were dropped with excellent results. On the return trip, the enemy continued to concentrate his efforts on the 1st Bombardment Division. Figures show on many planes, 210 German aircraft, the largest number ever claimed by the division of the 8th Air Force for anyone. Anyway, 420 men failed to return. And it says here, this reflects the highest credit on this organization and the Army Air Force and of the United States by the Secretary of War, J.A. Julio. That was just one mission. But there were other missions like it. There were many missions.
Now, can you tell me about a typical...
Well, there was
how
one...
did you prep for just an everyday mission? Now, during briefings, would you go?
Oh, yes. The
whole crew go?
Yep, they woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd come in and hold your box and get your socks and, and so forth, and your cocks and whatever. And breakfast at 2, briefing at 4, breakfast at 6, and take off at 8. So we would go in for breakfast. Okay, fine. Then at 4 o'clock we'd go into the briefing room, and there was a big map with strings attached showing where we were going. And we would penetrate into Germany 500, 600, 700 miles. And that meant 10 hours over enemy territory. And we lost 5,000 bombers, B-17s over Germany. 5,000, 10 men in each bomber. It was actually suicide. And on top of that, the targets that we were going to. We didn't go to Berlin. Berlin was too dangerous to go yet. But we did hit Hanover in the sun. We did hit Hamburg. We couldn't go over to the Rhine. Going over France, we were not permitted to drop bombs on France because of their friends. But we penetrated deep into Germany. We're losing 30 bombers a day, 40 bombers, 20 bombers, 50 bombers, 60 bombers. We went to Regensburg, a ball bearing factory that made ball bearings for Hitler's tanks and so forth. We lost 60 bombers. Then we did a good job, but we lost 60 bombers. Then it was wrongly reported that Regensburg had been revamped, and they were building more.
Now, when you were hearing stories of fell plane crews that were being shot down, were you?
Oh, not many of our crew never. We were in a barracks. We were in a barracks where there were maybe like 50, 60, 70, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 crews, and many times we came back, and they never came back. Yeah. So what we saw was the personnel would come in, open up the lockers, take out all their stuff, and what belonged to the government they would throw back into the into their supply room, and the rest of the personnel, the pictures or whatever, they'd send back to their parents.
Now, what I was going to ask is, when you were on missions, did they Could you tell if more planes were being brought down by fighter aircraft or by?
Oh, we could see
by
a planes
flak?
going down by flak. The flak was so strong that we'd come back with 100 holes in our ship. Most of them. You want to show the plane in there, and it was unbelievable. They were so powerful, the German army, that they could have taken over the whole world. Really and truly. The Air Corps was better than ours. Our planes were doing 200 miles an hour. They were coming at us at 400 miles an hour. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulf 111 and Henkel bombers and everything. They had much better equipment than we had. And at 30,000 feet, you can't breathe. And then we flew mission after mission after mission and saw planes raining down from the sky. And sometimes there was as many as 2,000, 3,000 airplanes in the sky at the same time, killing each other. And you could see the planes blowing up, and you'd wave to a guy in the next plane. So we had an open window, and he'd wave back at you the next minute. Boom! Powder. All you see was pieces raining on your plane. Pieces of everything. One mission we went on, and I'll never forget this. We were told not to go. Then all of a sudden somebody said, well, let him go. So we went. We climbed up to 30,000 feet. The clouds were from zero to 30,000 feet. And so we flew, and we flew. And then all of a sudden we get a recall. A recall. Oh, somebody made a mistake.
While you were in flight.
While we're in flight, come back. Well, we didn't know where the next plane was, and so forth and so on. It was solid, thick. 42 planes crashed, not mission, and we never dropped our bombs or anything. We came down, and we had to close our engines to try to hear the next one. When we got out, we were only a couple of 100 feet above the North Sea.
Wow.
Many planes just went right into the sea, and a good thing that my pilot was able to distinguish the fact that we were that close to drowning in the water.
Now, when you, on that specific day, did you have to, how would you release your fuel and bombs? Would you let that go in the water?
Yeah, well, I would get down. See, what happened was that they said that a lot of bombs were being dropped because the plane personnel forgot to pull the pins on the bombs. It was my job to get down into the Bombay area and pull the pins.
And that would arm the bomb.
That would arm the bomb. You're right. One day it happened. Look what happened. I pull the pins on takeoff, and all of a sudden we lost an engine. Now we can't get any altitude with a load of bombs and the pins, and we might crash into somebody and blow up a whole big area.
So is this while you're taxiing to get off?
Yeah, we're taxiing to get off. So we're going around and around and around, and then we had closed the bomb bay doors. Now all of a sudden, and I'm down there, and they opened up the bomb bay doors. I almost went right down. I didn't have my parachute on yet because if you walk during the whatchamacallit, you can't wear a parachute.
Right.
If I didn't hold on, then all of a sudden I get to put the bombs back in, put the pins back in the bombs. There I am down there putting the pins back in the bombs so that they won't explode if we should crash.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we go around and around and around, and then when they did that, my tail gunner had cranked down his tail wheel, and now they said, "Okay, get the tail wheel up again, so we could stay afloat."
Yeah.
And the tail hit him in the head, and he lay there bleeding away, and we were finally we landed. I mean, somebody else got hurt too. And I put the pins back in, and we landed with the bomb bay doors open. and we almost got killed.
Sure.
And the plane was going up and down and down and up and up, and that was just one mission. I mean, it was so dangerous. It was good. You live in fame and you get down in flames, but believe me, the dangers were there.
Can you tell me, do you recall your first combat mission?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. First one was Cologne. That was the center of Germany. Cologne. We would fly into Germany, and we would go to the. It was a church city. It was considered the most famous church city and from Cologne, to fool the Germans, what we would do is go off to our target, so that we would fool the Germans and let them know where we were going. And so we did that, and they didn't. The flak was so thick that the Germans would stay away because they would get shot down by flak. That's how thick it was.
Sure.
The puff, boom, 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 boom. They had accurate guns. The flak took a lot of places down. And we came back. We had all shrapnel through it, and I caught a couple of pieces of shrapnel in my neck, in my arm, and they wasn't too bad. But there was thin. The B-17. It was plastic. It was a plastic plane.
The membrane.
Sure. And so we finally got back. We made it. Then we made the first 5 missions, and then we made 10 missions, and so forth. And then we flew a lot of missions, and we got a recall. And when we got a recall, it didn't count. It did not count as a mission. We didn't find the target. We had to find a target. We couldn't find the target. So we brought the bombs back, or we dumped them somewhere. That was it.
And you had stated if you had flown with another crew,
Sure.
that didn't count as a mission, correct?
I don't even remember if that counted as a mission. No, I'll tell you why. Because when I got assigned to that, I don't know whether they would even put it down. Oh, wait a minute. They had to put it down. I'll tell you why. Because I did get the Distinguished Flying Cross for
That's
that.
correct.
So they did that. But it was suicide.
Now, what's
We go to Hamburg. We go to Cologne. We go to Berkeley. Oh,
what was your job title on your plane?
I was a flight engineer. There were 2 flight engineers, top turret, and we would exchange positions.
Now, what
So
were
we-
your duties on the plane?
Oh, the duties. We pre-flighted the plane. We made sure that the plane was ready to fly. If we discovered something that didn't look right, we were responsible.
And you did this every mission?
Every mission, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called a pre-flight.
And what was your rank at the time you started flying?
I was a staff sergeant at the time.
That's right.
Later on, they gave us tech sergeant. Yeah.
Now, did you get promoted while you were over in Germany?
When I got shot down, I was a staff sergeant. But then, while we were a prisoner of war, they gave us tech sergeant.
Now,
They thought we deserved it.
How much time between missions would you get off? Was that based on weather? Or
Well, the weather had a lot to do with it. The weather, winters in Germany and France were terrible. The weather there is so bad. The winds and the clouds, because don't forget you're on the North Sea.
how long would a typical mission last? 10 hours or so?
Yeah.
Now, what would you bring on board the flight with you for equipment?
Well, when you had a flak suit, you wore a flak suit while you were on the plane.
Yeah.
Not everybody wore a flak suit. The position was everybody would be called by the pilot to say, if you're okay, all's well, all's well, all's well, all's well. And they want to know if you got your equipment on ready and so forth and so on. Now at that time, we flew with open windows. And at 30,000 feet, it's 60 below zero. Yeah. 60 below zero. And when you let a tear, it froze right in your eye. You had to break the ice on your eyes and your nose.
Yeah.
And when you breathe, ice formed. Ice formed there.
Would would you wear a helmet and?
Yeah, we wore a helmet. Yeah. We wore a leather hat, and then we wore a helmet, and then we wore a flak suit too. But the
Now,
flak was so thick you get killed.
how many men were on a plane?
Well, okay, now I'll tell you about February 22nd, 1944. Took off. We were the lead plane. We had, I think, 18, 20, 25 missions that counted. And the reason why I mentioned the fact that it wasn't recorded as 25, we flew missions that didn't count. So that day we took off, and it was February 22nd, bitter cold day. General Eisenhower was planning D-Day. There could not be a D-Day unless we crippled the German Luftwaffe. They would have killed everybody on the beach.
Yeah.
They were so powerful that it just wouldn't have happened. They would. Oh, not my plane. But okay. So we took off, and like I say, we were leading 48 bombers. 12 bombers in a squadron, four squadrons to a group.
Okay.
And we were leading. And the Germans had a habit of coming in out of the sun. And so then all of a sudden they changed their tactics. They started frontal attacks. And here we are in the front. And so I'm flying top turret, and I see the bullets bouncing off my whatchamacallit, my bulletproof a blister, and we got hit. We're on fire. And the first thing that I saw was my radio man. I took a look in the radio room, and there was my radio man. Was half his face was gone, or most of it, or whatever. I don't remember just how much. And what could I do? He's sitting there helpless. I pulled off his flak suit. He wore a flak suit also. Put on his parachute. Brought him over to the bomb bay doors. We'd already dropped our bombs. And I screamed at him, John, 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 and he was just helpless. I put his hand on the ripcord, and I said, John, you got to get out of here. And I threw, and I never tried to get any medal for this or anything like that there. And I threw him out of the plane. And I screamed to him that you got to remember to pull your ripcord.
Yeah, how high were we at this point?
Oh, we were maybe 25 to 30,000 feet. Okay. It's hard to tell. And so he's gone. Then I see my co-pilot. In the meanwhile, my navigator was killed, and my bombardier. My navigator got married before we went overseas. My pilot was 22 years old. Hell of a nice guy. Real perfect guy. He was 22 years old. It was his birthday. And if we got back from this mission, we were going to a castle in England called Reading Castle for a couple of months of R&R. Because they saw that we were kind of everybody was sent there. Yeah. That was the day we got shot down.
Now, were they killed by bullets or pushed flak, or you know?
Yeah, well, then I see my co-pilot coming in out of his seat.
Yeah.
And he's coming out of his seat, and he's ready to parachute out too. Well, he's ready to parachute out of the plane. I go to the back of the plane, and I see four gunners sitting there, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. You don't know what to do because you don't hear. You hear the klaxon horn going, and so what do? Like crazy nuts? I'm not crazy. Got to open up the trunk, the back door of the plane. If not, we're stuck. Nobody had the presence of mind to even awake out of their trance. I jammed my shoulder on the door, and the door flew out. I didn't have my parachute on because I had just come from the Bombay doors, from the from where the bombs are dropped. It's a narrow space place. And so I run to these guys and I tell them, I start banging on them. I tell them, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. Nobody's moving. They're all paralyzed. When I knocked out the door and I didn't have my parachute, I'm hanging out the door by my hands. I almost went out with the door. And I didn't have my parachute on. And I'm hanging on. And one of my fellow guys woke up out of his trance. And he came over and he grabbed me around the neck and pulled me back in. I put my parachute on. We had an extra parachute on the floor for me. And I said to these guys, we got to get out of here. Again, I go over there and I shake their heads and so forth. Nobody's moving. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to stay. I know you got to do something. Now this is close to between 25 and 30,000 feet. You couldn't breathe because we didn't have our oxygen.
Sure.
And in 10 seconds or 20 seconds, you're dead. I decided, while we were going down in flames, the Germans were still shooting 20 millimeters, all kinds of machine gun fire at us. One of them came in through the back and splattered my whole neck and my back and my keister full of shrapnel. And I could feel the blood, the warm blood running out of inside my electric suit. And knowing I'm in real trouble. Anyway, I bailed out. And I remembered, don't pull the ripcord so quick, because if you do, you'll die from lack of oxygen. And so I found myself breathing. I can still remember the trees and the farmhouses. When you look down, you see all of what's going on down below. Pulled the ripcord. Knocked me unconscious. Woke up. 2 German fighters are coming after me. We had shot down one of their German fighter planes and killed one of our gunners had shot one of their German pilots in the air.
Yeah.
And of course the Germans found out about it. They knew that had happened.
Yeah.
So I thought they were coming after me, and I'm yelling at God upstairs, Schmeisterwell, that's a Jewish expression, please help. I'm screaming and blood and what a mess. And after I pulled my ripcord, these fighters came down after me on both sides. They created a wave, like on an ocean.
Yeah, were they flying side by side?
Yeah, they came down on both sides.
Because of kind of whirlwind.
Yeah. Instead of shooting me, just parachute collapsed, and I look up, and going down with a piece of silk, and I'm screaming and yelling and doing everything and begging the good Lord or somebody help, and maybe a few hundred feet above the ground, the parachute opens, hit the ground. I'm laying there. Along came a bunch of civilians with shotguns, with clubs. They started beating me. And they were yelling, schieß, the word shoot for German. Schieß, you shoot him, no, you shoot him. We'll all shoot him. A couple of German soldiers came up in a jeep or something. And for interrogation purposes, they dragged me away from the civilians. They took me to a jail and threw me into a jail. And I lay in that jail for about 3, 4, 5, I don't remember how many days. No medical attention, nothing. Die if you have to. There were other prisoners who tried to tell the jailers, comrade, medicine. No. Truck drives up after a few days. I don't remember how many days, 2, 3, 4, 5. Truck drives up, and they're taking us out. They're going to take us to Frankfurt, Germany, take some guys to Frankfurt, Germany, others to a hospital. And so When the a truck came, and I hear somebody moaning and groaning inside, and it was pitch black in there, and I pulled back the pitch black tail to whatever, and who was it? It was my radio man, John Guros. He had survived. They took us both to a hospital, and where they spent a couple of days just taking all the bullets out of me, the strap out of me, and everything out of me. They asked me to sign a paper, it was legitimate, to have his eye taken out, which I signed the paper, and they took his eye out while he was there. And later on, he got sent home with the grips home. Now, it's my turn to what are they going to do with me? Being a Jew, Gestapo comes around all the time looking for Jewish guys. I could have ended up in a concentration camp and burned. So I begged them to let me go with a couple of guys that came in to help out some of the other soldiers. They came in and they put me on a stretcher. And I said, no, forget the stretcher. And they carried me out to the truck. The truck had come to pick up some more German prisoners. Took us to Frankfurt, Germany. Frankfurt, Germany, we get off the truck. We're going into the IG Farben industry, big factory, where the Germans used as a headquarters for their interrogating the American flyers and so forth. So I'm lagging behind. I couldn't walk much. We're lagging behind a whole group.
Yeah.
And we came to a flight of stairs, concrete stairs, and here I am, so weak and everything. And some old man was in the crowd, and he got in behind the guards, and he pushed me down a flight of stairs, of concrete stairs. But he finally carried me to a jail. They got into a jail with about 50 other personnel. Very little food, a piece of bread once in a while for a few days. Once in a while, a guard would give us a cigarette. And can you imagine 50 guys smoking, taking one puff out of a cigarette? When it came to me, I had a little stick in my pocket. I pulled out the little stick and took the cigarette and put it in my mouth, and I burned my lips. And we stayed there for a few days, and then interrogation and pounding and so forth and beatings. And they put us back on a train, and on our way to Stalag Luft 6 in Lithuania. And on the way, we see people being herded on to railroad cars. We at that time didn't know that these were Holocaust people going to their deaths.
Sure.
There were cracks, and they called it a 48. It was a type of train that would carry 40 horses and eight people. And we could see the people who were being herded on the planes and being clubbed and so forth. And we were wondering what the heck is going on. We didn't know they were going to their concentration camps from Frankfurt. That was the main headquarters. And then other towns that we went to, and the train stopped, we looked through the cracks. And for bread, the Germans threw a piece of bread at us while we were on the train for 6 days and 6 nights. And we finally ended up at Stalag 6, and was it Gross Chow? Or was it Stalag Luft number 6? And that's where Hitler had his headquarters on the Russian front, only a couple of miles down the camp. And we didn't know it at the time. The Germans came in and they started machine gunning and so forth us. They didn't want to kill anybody, but they wanted to scare the hell out of us. Then we saw men coming in who were trying to escape. One time, three young kids came in, they escaped, and the Germans shot them in the back as we were there watching. Another time I saw this happen, a kid, the two guys had a ball, they were playing ball, and one of them went over the warning wire, and the guard on the tower shot the kid dead, reaching across to pick a ball. Another time, two guys were fighting, and one jumped out of the window. German guard was walking by and shot the guy dead. Yeah, that's what it was.
Now, when you were...
And food, this is interesting. for food. There were 50, 60 guys in the barracks. Oh, one more death. One day, it was in Lithuania in the winter. It's winter 20. It's daylight 24 hours a day. The kid who I knew slightly in the next barracks worked in a cookhouse, and he tried the door one morning. We were locked in. He tried the door one morning, and thought it was okay for him to go to the cookhouse. And so I hear somebody whistling and twirling a towel, and all of a sudden, boom, a rifle shot. I run to the window, and there's this kid, only about 10 feet away from me, and a bullet right hole. The guard shot him because he was out in a bullet hole. He's looking up at me, and I'm looking down at him, and I'm screaming and screaming and yelling and screaming, and I even tried the door to open up the door, but we were locked in from the outside. And the kid died right in front of me. There he was. And he's looking at me and begging for me to help him. I had no way to help him. The next day, had a funeral. We were at the gate, and they threw him in a box, took him out, dug a hole with a big area where thousands and thousands of people were buried. Nowhere near did anybody know where he was buried. Buried him, and that was it. And then after the war, later on after the war, the family went out there, because it was in a POW magazine, to have a ceremony for him, but they didn't know where he was.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, for food, we get a Red Cross parcel once a month. It was a small stuff. It was a piece of a little cookies and a piece of cheese and piece of soap, and some other stuff. And I'll never forget this. They used to put the soap next to the cheese, and of course, when you ate the cheese, you were eating the soap too. The Red Cross used to send it in a parcel, but the Germans used to steal most of the parcels.
Sure.
So for themselves, yeah. So that was that. Then we would send somebody up to the cookhouse. They used to bring in a dead horse from the battlefield. I'd throw the whole dead horse into a big bat, what you call it. And with the maggots still floating around, I gotta wipe my nose. With the maggots still floating around, somebody would come back with a pail, and we would dole out a cup of soup into a cup. We had soup. Then they used to bring in for six men a loaf of bread. Half of it was made out of sawdust, and half was made out of flour. And then we had cards. The Red Cross sent us in some cards. And what we did was we used to draw cards to see who would get the centerpiece and who would get the end cut. The end cut was only about this big, and the centerpiece was just a little bit more. So that's what we had for a meal. We had a cup of soup with maggots still floating, yep, and a piece of bread. Then what little bit we could get out of our Red Cross parcel. And we stayed at Stalag 6 for the longest time, until like June of 44, and just around the time of Hitler's assassination, the Russians were coming. We were only a mile away from the prison camp. They were only a mile away from the prison camp. So they got us out. And pack your bags. We're moving out. They marched us over to the seaport of Memel on the Baltic Sea. And there we got on a boat. I'll never forget the name. I looked at the name of the ship, and I can still see that ship. Masurin. It was a coal ship, just unloaded coal. And the fumes were still there. And they put about 1,000 of us down into the hold of the little ship. There wasn't enough room to even sit down. We slept standing up, or changing seats for maybe 6 days and 6 nights. No food, just on a few little things that we had to eat. And a lot of guys, they let us go upstairs to pee overboard. A lot of guys jumped into the Baltic Sea and just drowned. They couldn't take it. And there we were, just sitting there, and we stood up most of the time. We get off the ship after 6 days, of that, and everybody is weak. And here we're interrogated and screamed at by a red-headed German captain. We found out that some of his family had been killed in by some of our bombs in this town. So naturally, his love for us was not the greatest.
Sure.
He had with him a bunch of Hitler Youths. Hitler Youths. And the Hitler Youths, he was told that Hitler Youths to get into the formation and start clubbing these soldiers and bayoneting them and so forth. And sure enough, these kids wanted to show that they were Hitler Youth, under Heil Hitler. And they came into the formations of the 1,000 of us and clubbing us and beating us and whatever you could think of. Here were we just getting off a ship. And all of a sudden, the road was littered with guys. Oh, they put us in handcuffs. We were handcuffed. We were put in handcuffs, and so we couldn't do much. I was handcuffed to some fellow like they call Okie, a big, tough, strong guy, and he half dragged me because I got hit over the head too. And he was half dragging me half the way. And we walked for about 3 or 4 miles, and we got to Stalag number 4. Stalag number 4, here we are, weak, tired, hungry, everything. We got to go to Stalag number 4, but you got to be searched. They were searching for any type of war material that we might have, like a compass or maybe some knife or something in that category. I get in, and there's this big German, about 7 feet tall. His name was Ham Hands. And so I laid my few possessions down on his table and opened them up. And I had a cake of soap, and he picked up the cake of soap, and he hit me over the head with a cake of soap.